Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Palma, Dutch Dr. Speed Selling. This is the Raging Verbalist number 197. If you're new, welcome. If you're an old hat, glad that you're back. Also, Raging Verbalist is available on YouTube and on the Facebook page for the Position to Win book group. So we can do that. Also, ring the bell, say nice things, subscribe. We'd love to have you here. All right. So every week I talk about something that bothers me, disturbs me, drives me nuts, like my phone being, what happened to that? I thought I had turned on. Anyway. So with me, of course, is the ever lovely Sandra. Cassandra steps into your shoes. Not exactly, but she is there to ask the questions that I will be putting forth the answers. All right, Sandra, welcome.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I'm just in one of those moods, and I think we've got a great topic to talk about. So what are we going to talk about today?
All right, so we're talking about death of a brand, specifically the Nissan Titan truck. So how do brands get started?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, when I go and talk to people about their marketing and how they put together a company and what are their cool ideas, is that they usually have like some kind of spark of interest and say, oh, yeah, got it figured out, gonna go make this, whatever this is. So Nissan, which actually was in the United States as Datsun, D-A-T-S-U-N, because they thought Nissan, who knows how you're going to say it, doesn't sound as good. So they went with Datsun. Anyway, 1959, they said, hey, we make these little pickups. Maybe we can sell them in the U.S. because the U.S. is a big country, has lots of need for trucks to haul stuff. Car companies, since the beginning of time, figured out that utility vehicles like a truck were useful in a variety of different ways. And so they kicked off in 1959, and they started rolling along, and they made lots of little pickups over the years and had lots of evolution and did lots of, and so those are the ways that it kind of got going. But they were stuck in, small pickup land because obviously in Japan, you don't see a lot of big, giant, super duty F-350 monster trucks, not usually on the street. So that's how they got started. That was the genesis of Datsun and Nissan getting into the pickup business. So they've been there a long time. What is that, 64 years? And they've been churning these out and selling them to the U.S. market.
And why would Nissan take such a big gamble?
Well, they took a big gamble because they wanted to say, let's see, we're making a little bit of money on small pickups and all of that, and it's doing okay. They're always the stepchild to Toyota being the Mac Daddy, even in the early days. And they saw how the big three automakers, Ford, General Motors with Chevrolet and GMC truck, and then Dodge with the Ram trucks, later to be called Ram, but they were just Dodge trucks, were just cleaning up. And I think they saw that and said, hey, we got to go get ourselves that bigger chunk. They had great expansion plans. They said the U.S. market is ripe for us to go and just take a piece of that market. There are lots of companies that have this mistaken belief that those who have a chunk of this market, I just want everybody to remember one thing. If you take any notes at all from this, is that the market that you are going into, if it's already established, everybody who wants whatever you're going to be selling is already buying it. And therefore, for you to grow, like in this case, you got to take market share from somebody else. And that's exactly the storm that they stepped into to do that. And it is a classic positioning exercise, and it is one that has taken them a long time to figure out, maybe this isn't for us. We got to go and move on and go do something else.
And why don't we see more small trucks?
Well, there's a thing called a chicken tax. I know you're saying a chicken tax. Now, having the background that you have in agriculture, that's called growing up on a farm, you've probably seen these things and they cluck around. Well, in 1964, they levied a tariff against imported light pickups against some European countries. Now, you may say, how is Japan in Europe? It's not, but eventually it just covers everything. Now, it's pretty silly of a name And what they did is they tacked on 25% tariff onto every small pickup. This is why, by the way, when somebody says, and I don't drift off much into politics, but I really dislike hidden taxes and hidden regulations which cut off markets. And this is a perfect example of one. We're coming up on how many years? 64 to 23. Wow, we're coming up on 59 years, going to have a 60th anniversary. This thing is going to be collecting Social Security soon, and we still have this stupid tariff on. And it's ridiculous. Why is it there? I don't believe it really serves a purpose. Now, they've done studies, so somebody was funded to do a study. Did the chicken tax drive Americans to buy big trucks instead of buying little trucks? Doesn't matter. The marketplace should be the decider, should be the arbiter, should be able to one that says it. So the chicken tax actually made it more difficult. So a Toyota pickup that would have been X dollars in any other market was X dollars plus 25% because, well, we're bringing it in to the United States. So that is why we don't see as many small pickups, in spite of the fact that there's a lot of utility and a lot of use for them, but don't have them because, well, why would anybody bring them in if you're going to lose money on it? And doesn't make any sense.
And what about the birth of the Titan?
So it is a pretty cool name. I like the name of Titan, but the birth of the Titan, and we almost have to have a trumpet sound, but we don't have a lot of sound effects. So, but anyway, 2004, dubbed as a 2005 model, Nissan came out with a full-size pickup, their rendition of a full-size pickup in the U.S. market, and they said, "Here we are." I'm sure when they did their PowerPoint presentation, the first thing that they said is, "We're going to sell 100,000 of these things without a doubt. We're going to knock out 100,000 of these because the first year we're going to have a little bit longer year because they introduced it in 2004, went through 2005, and we're going to just knock this out of the park." Well, turns out, well, they did. They did a pretty decent job, and they got pretty close. I'm sure there was a lot of high-fiving and belly bumping because 2005 they sold 86,945. Those are the most accurate numbers I've got. I don't know if they're 100% accurate, but that's what they ended up selling. And everybody said, "Hey, that's probably a pretty cool idea." And everybody was pretty excited. Now, the problem with this, the real problem with this, is that what they didn't have, which you're going to be able to get in just a second, is that they didn't have access to the most important thing they could have gotten, which is they could, if they had this, maybe they wouldn't have made this mistake. But what they could have gotten their hands on is this. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it's positioned to win. This applies to brands as well. This is my book. And why do I call it a failure? Because they sat around and wrote up round numbers. We're going to do 100,000 the first year. We're going to do 150,000 the second year. We're going to do $200,000. We're going to make so much profit because they spent a lot of money. It cost a lot of dough. Didn't do the research to find out how much dough they spent to go out there and design, develop, build the manufacturing capability. They may have used another plant, but they rebuilt it. Did all of that, hired the workers, and went through all of that testing. And I mean, we're talking about a multi-year process just to sell 86, almost 87,000 vehicles, right? I mean, that's what they did. So they did all of that work for that purpose. And the reason why I call it a failure is that no one sat down and said, where is our position in the market and why would somebody do that? So what I would suggest that you do before you spend your money, because maybe you don't have the money that Nissan had that burned through it. My guess is that if you actually went through and could get the true forensic accounting throughout the 20-year run, because they're going to kill this brand in 24. 24 is going to be the last year of production. And all I'm going to tell you is that if you're going to want to buy one of these things, go buy one. But once you buy a dead brand, once you buy something that's gone, parts become harder to find. All kinds of other things happen. So you're going to see yet another fall off the cliff. Happens over and over again whenever these brands die. So what my suggestion is, you go pick up. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, position to win. You can pick it up at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million if you want to buy the physical one, or you can go to our website, positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. Ask me to inscribe it. Maybe you say, John, put Death of the Titan, Death of the Titan, and I'll inscribe it and send it to you. You can always go there. You can also pick it up as Kindle, Nook, or Apple iBooks. And then on the other side, if you're still doing remote work, or if you want to know how to do remote work better, still as applicable as the day that we freshly minted it for the pandemic, which is remote work for a better world. Learn that so you can do this remote thing better. And if you do that, that's really smart. And finally, if you want to get yourself some rage every day, get yourself a Raging Verbalist mug, because this is what gets me going. And no, I mean, I would love to have like special effects. Maybe we'll work on that. But all I can say is that everything tastes better in a Raging Verbalist mug. That's what I say. Okay. Sandra, what is our next? What else are we talking about with this thing?
All right. So what was the success of the Titan?
Well, you know, it's always funny because I've been in so many of these meetings where people will come up with every damn excuse under the sun. And, you know, saying lots of numbers on the internet ends up getting people really foggy. Their best year ever was their first year. And then it dropped off a little bit. So everybody says, well, you know, we had that initial surge, but now we're going to go build a base. And then it dropped off again. And then it dropped off again. And then in 2009, it was down to 19,000. You're losing your shirt if you're a car company trying to build this brand and you only have 19,000 sales in 1 year and maintaining parts and doing all that other stuff. And here's the sad news, is that it doesn't climb out of that toilet. And I say it that way with affection. Really, it pops up when they do a refresh to the design. They pop up to like 50,000-ish for a couple of years. And then 2022, the best numbers we've got, they sold 15,000 of these things. Now, you know, essentially they're becoming collector's items, if there is such a thing as a collector's item of a full-size Japanese pickup that's built in the United States. So that has been the success of the Titan, which is probably somebody should have, you know, stuck a fork in it and said we're done earlier, but they did not.
And what were the signs that this was going to be a near impossible task for this brand?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that when you show up at this marketplace, you don't want to show up to a knife fight, as they say, with, you know, or you want to show up at a gunfight. Forget about a knife fight. You don't want to show up at a gun. Now, you want to show up at a knife fight with a gun, but the opposite is not good. You know, when you have Ford kicking these things out, when you have, you know, Chevy kicking these things out, you've got, you know, the Ram, you've got, you know, the fact that you got the GMC brand. So the top four are selling lots and lots of vehicles. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So if they did a positioning diagram, which I will tell you right now how to do it, the easiest, simplest one, a one-dimensional, you might call it a list, but it's actually a positioning diagram, is you list who is the back daddy all the way to who is the little puny woony and all those other things. And, you know, they should have actually done that and said, are there enough counter purchasers? Are there, and counter meaning counter to the market, who say, I want to take this chance, I want to take this risk, I want to do all these other things? Because, see, buying a vehicle isn't a utilitarian thing. Everything that you buy, you have some sense of pride of ownership. Maybe you say, well, John, that isn't true. Well, but we know from history that this is true. There is always a certain level of brand loyalty. So I believe that when they did this, no one sat there and said, you know what? We are up against some stiff competition, and this could really be a tough slog. And if you total all this stuff up, never cracked 100,000. Really, really a bad idea.
And was there history that could have been looked back on that would have helped them understand the dangers they were in?
Well, my father owned a 1967 Ford pickup. And all I can tell you is that when he got that Ford pickup, he was a very happy guy. Now, there were people who had other kinds of pickups. And at the time, there were really two pickup brands that were on the top of the heap. Surprisingly, they're still there, Ford and Chevy. Now, when you would go places, you would always see all these other things. Now, I wanted him to buy a Jeep pickup. Well, why didn't we own a Jeep pickup? In spite of John saying it's so cool, we're going to have four-wheel drive, we can go in the backwoods, we're going to go do these really badass things. And my father said, yeah, except there's one problem. Went to the Jeep dealership, which, by the way, was, that was its own, getting into another planet kind of cult thing. And they built this Jeep pickup, and the bed, you couldn't put a 4x8 sheet of plywood in that thing. And my father said, nix, done. So all they had to do was look at all of the trucks that had failed before in the big segment from decades before. It doesn't mean that we can't succeed today, but we should always look back and know our history. How did this market evolve? If there's history in a market, you should learn about it because it will give you insight. Don't be trapped by it. Don't say that you can never come up with something new, because that's not the case. We see new brands come in and wipe out the old brands. We see this in a variety of categories. But if they looked at it and they said international harvester, big farm, equipment manufacturer, there are people who love international harvester. Well, they tried to make pickups. They tried to make an equivalent of the Suburban, which I met people who said, this is better than any Suburban's ever going to be. Where are they now? Well, they're out rusting somewhere. Build quality was a little marginal. Things weren't as good as they had hoped they would be. All you have to do is look through history, and they could have seen that there were lots of truck brands that came and went and became cult figures and never, ever hit those numbers. So for heaven's sakes, do at least a one-dimensional positioning diagram of any market you're going to go after, then do an historical one and do this kind of timeline of it. Also, if you do it a two-dimensional with the 4 quadrants, you would learn an awful lot. So I don't know if they did it or not. If I was there, I don't know if I would have said anything different to stop them, but I sure in hell would have said to them, if you guys think this is a slam dunk, you're going to be the one who gets slammed.
And how do you explain how trucks have become this huge market?
Well, I think that trucks have become a huge market because at one point in time, when my father bought a pickup truck, a pickup truck was one of those things that, most, middle class suburban people wouldn't ever think about buying a truck. Maybe, a station wagon was a big deal, but nobody was going to go buy a truck. But once we had a truck, well, here's a crazy thing. Once we had a truck, then my father and my brother and I became the moving company for the church and for the club and for everything else. Now, he used it for his business, and we used it for, doing stuff for rental property and all that other stuff. But I'm going to tell you that everybody wanted to glom onto the pickup. Now, at that point in time, they were very rudimentary, and they had nothing like they have today. I mean, today you step into a pickup and you're like, wow, this is really an amazing, cockpit, cocoon, whatever you want to call it. So I think that what happened is that the car companies realized, first off, they're huge in profit. They're just massive profit. And the second thing is that they have so much utility value to them. And for the other side of it is that, you can, buy it with the crew cab today. They don't call it that, but buy it with the doors and shove all the kids in there and take all your stuff, and you got all these other things. And so I think it's become a huge market because it is an analog to what used to be the big giant station wagons, which are all gone. Yes, there's a minivan out there, but trucks have a certain appeal to them. You sit high, you can carry lots of stuff, and they used to be the inexpensive way to do it. I remember the first time I met a customer who drove a pickup truck. Strange thing, but he's driving a pickup truck, and I got in it, and it was this upscale interior and all that. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't my father's pickup. They have really gone that way. So I think it became a huge market because first off, you could buy them and you could get a lot of utility. And more importantly is that you could actually get a better deal, if you will. That's all flipped because you now have $120,000 pickups, which I think is kind of kooky crazy.
And what can be learned from this attempt at a brand in a crowded market?
Well, I think the biggest thing to be learned from whenever you have a crowded market is all you have to do is you got to look at the numbers, and these are projections. So I'm going to just use this as a backdrop. So projected for 23 is that Ford's going to sell 726,000 F-Series pickups, and Chevy's going to sell 536,000, and Ram, because they dropped the Dodge name, is 446,000, and then you go to GMC, which by the way is a sister to the Chevy, basically the same thing, rebadged, little different, interiors and all that stuff, 215,000. So if you look at those those four, three really, but four, you see that there's this huge market. So what you have to ask yourself is, so how do I find a way to make money in this crowded market? And what I do is I start going down there. So Toyota, which spends a lot of money building their Tundra, which I have ridden in, very nice truck, they're only at 122,000 with all their promotion, with all of the sense of quality that you can get from a Toyota. They're half, a little more than half, but they're basically half of the GMC, which is number 4. And then you drop down to Honda, which really is a niche vehicle, is at 53,000. And then finally we drop down to, the Nissan, which they still project 21,000, probably won't hit that. So what can we learn from this attempt is that, you don't want to be the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, or 6th, or whatever, sitting on an airplane, sitting next to this guy. And so what do you do? And he goes, I do a lot of things. I say, yeah, I do a lot of things. So, hey, we had a few hours, so why don't we unpack a lot of things? Turns out that he was the publisher and editor of a cigar magazine. Now, cigars made a huge resurgence years ago. They became lifestyle things. Everybody was smoking cigars and all that. Now, by that point in time, I had quit the whole smoking nicotine thing. I used to smoke everything, but I'd given it up. So I'm sitting there talking to the guy. I said, well, okay, so let's do like a positioning diagram. He was the 3rd or 4th, depending upon month and what was going on in his market. No one is going to survive as the 3rd or 4th. I don't even know if there are any of the cigar magazines that survive, but he was number 3 or number 4. And as we were talking, he said, wow, what would you suggest? And I'm like, well, take the money as much as you can. Don't expect this thing to be long-term successful, primarily because once you get past a certain point, you are invariably in serious trouble. Don't know whatever happened to him. Wished him well, wished him success. But what we can learn from a crowded market is unless you can truly niche yourself and live with your niche and then build an acceptable market that you can then, that's defendable, you will get trounced and killed in crowded markets. And this is why when you see how many different companies out there just go out there for whatever reason, ego usually, and say, we're going to go out and do this, and they are me too. How can you add something to it? Now, let me throw the fly in the ointment. Will the Cybertruck that Elon Musk has been promising for years, will it be successful? Here's your little quick bonus. He has 2 million people around the globe that gave him a deposit on this thing. Now, of those 2 million, it's going to be interesting to see how many of those people are going to spend $50,000 to $80,000 for a Cybertruck. And when those Cybertrucks become commonplace, will that in fact drop some of the allure? Don't know, because if I had a way to predict the future, I would be betting on that future. But I will tell you one thing. He has found a niche that, because he's willing to be unique and not be like the other guys who are in there. I mean, Rivian's out there, understands a pretty good vehicle. In fact, I've seen several of them. They seem to be well put together. Not quite a full-size pickup, though. But here's the Cybertruck, and it's unique, and it's a niche, and he might be really super successful. Ford has not been successful with their F-150 Lightning, primarily because it's kind of a hack job to try to get in there, and they're not selling nearly as well, and they're having to discount them, and they're having to do that. Whenever you see that, then you know that they're not making success in the market. So the way to understand it is to always be very aware of how a market is put together before you dive in, and we will see, and we'll report about it on the Raging Verbalist. If Elon ends up selling 2 million of these things, well, that means that every one of us should have been buying Tesla stock, because he will make a freaking fortune. But we'll have to see. I mean, right now, he's been teasing this thing so long. Who knows when this thing's ever going to hit the real market. So with that said, I'm John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling. And for myself and the ever lovely Sandra, this has been the Raging Verbalist number 197. the death of a brand, the death of the Titan. So long live the Titan, and we'll see what happens as we go forward in time.